Hey guys, Jeremy here. Do you watch all these Moe's clips and Flat clips and Amara clips and go, God, I sure wish I could do that kind of damage? Well, I got bad news for you. You're never going to do that kind of damage if you're playing Zane. The good news is, I have a build that I've created that I think is the closest we could possibly get right now. It's a lot of fun, it's very interesting and weird, and it's going to involve a lot of farming. But, you know, if you put your heart and mind into it, maybe you'll be able to play your boy and do serious damage. I don't know about you, but when I started playing Borderlands 3, I was immediately drawn to Zane. Like, I was, before the game even came out, I was interested in Zane as a character. I like the gadgets. I like the ability to equip two different abilities to use, or action skills, I guess you should say. He struck me as a cool character, specifically because not a lot of people had figured him out. Even now, people really haven't wrapped their heads around just how his character works. So I wanted to take the time to make a video here to kind of talk about him and talk about this super cool build that I think is really fun and is really interesting and is very dangerous. So I like to call this the sudden death build. The reason why I call this that is because this revolves around you deliberately bringing your HP down to 1. So taking a look at my build here, we can see that I've gotten a lot of progress put into the Digiclone skill tree. Let's talk about the individual skills that we've got applied here to kind of maximize the damage. So first and foremost, we've got increased gun damage for each active skill, plus 20% now that we've got it to level 5. So obviously I don't need to tell you why that's good. Increased gun damage is super useful. We've got the action skill duration increased. This build revolves heavily around using your action skill to the best of its ability here. We've got plus 15% active action skill. Obviously we're increasing the duration of it in that time. It makes a lot of sense to go with that. We've got kill skill. Whenever Zane kills an enemy, he and his Digiclone receive increased gun damage and gain health regeneration for a few seconds. So this one's super useful, again, because we just want to max out how much damage that we're doing across the board, and this kind of goes a long way in making sure that we're taking advantage of every kind of DPS ability that we can possibly throw at it. Again, same here with the grenade mod on Fractal Frags as an ability. I put this one in here so that my Digiclone can throw out that grenade mod. We always want to have a really good kind of explosive, crazy grenade mod to soak them while we're just kind of fucking around with them doing damage. We've got passive ability duct tape mod. First shot fired from Zane's gun has a chance to also fire a grenade. Again, throwing grenades into the mix just serves to further increase the amount of damage that we're putting out on the character at all times. And then we've got this here. Whenever Zane swaps with his clone, his shield immediately begins recharging. This is very useful because specifically with the build that I have, we'll get into this a little bit later, but specifically because of the build that I have, the second that you activate your action skill, the second I throw that clone out there, or the turret, or both of them, my health goes right back down to 1. Literally 1. No shields, just 1 HP. And I do insane amounts of damage in that time, but it's important that we make sure immediately that we are getting our health back, because obviously we want to be able to do that damage, but we want to make sure we're not just getting smacked the second that we get on the battlefield. So there's a moment where it's going to be very risky kind of going about it, but you just got to be quick on your feet. That's what another ability does. Again, we'll go into that. We've got Old You. This is super useful. This is honestly, you can kind of take this one or leave this one, I would say. But what it does is it makes it so that when you throw out your clone, if you get downed, all you got to do is press F or G, apparently. But I don't have it mapped to that, so in my case, I press F, and you just instantly get revived. Super useful. Usually when I do this, I immediately throw out the turret instead, because I want to make sure that my health is low so that I can maximize my damage and my speed. And again, I know I keep saying it, but we'll get into why I want my health to be low in a little bit. So we got here Supersonic Man. Whenever one or more of Zane's action skills are active, he gains increased movement speed for each active action skill. So when I get both of them down, I get a 20% movement speed boost. So we're flying around the battlefield at this point, and the enemies are having a difficult time keeping up with us. Super useful. I know it probably sounds like it's not particularly useful. Believe me, it comes very much in handy when you have enemies who are constantly lobbing projectiles at you, specifically in kind of a predictive pattern. One that maybe in other situations you wouldn't be able to outrun, but in a situation where your speed is very fast, it's very easy to outrun. So we got Zane and his Digiclone gain a chance to ignore bullets. This chance is increased for a few seconds after activating an action skill. Disinfect stacks. Again, this is one where I could kind of take it or leave it. I don't gonna need to be here, but I wanted to make sure that this skill tree was getting maxed out because the last ability is super good, so I kind of just threw a point into this one here. You can really do whatever here. Maybe you throw a point into the grenade regeneration. I don't, because I don't even have a grenade because I have 2 action skills. Realistically, for the build, you want to just steer clear from grenades. You're going to be throwing them, and your Digiclone's going to be throwing them, and your Sentry is going to be throwing them anyway. So honestly, I just stay away from anything that kind of affects grenades, aside of in terms of damage. We've got Zane summons Digiclone. It consumes up to 3 grenades. For every grenade consumed, the Digiclone gains increased gun damage, max health, fire rate, etc., etc. This one doesn't hurt to have active here. We're not really concerned about grenade usage at all, pretty much, because grenades just kind of pop out. So this one's perfectly fine to have on here. Zane deals bonus shock damage to enemies that aren't targeting him. Again, just all about throwing damage at the enemy as much as possible. It's never a bad. This one's fantastic, and this one I really need to talk about a lot, specifically because it's very, very important that the clone is doing damage too. So when you're fighting an enemy, typically I just kind of revolve in a circle around them, as you can kind of see in that clip I showed you, and I'll go ahead and run it here. We want to make sure we're kind of circling around the enemy, keeping up, making sure that they're not able to kind of catch up to us in terms of, you know, all the projectiles flying at us and whatnot. It's going to vary depending on the boss you're fighting, but in a lot of cases, in most cases, I've found it's important to just be kind of on the move. Keep on going here. The reason why I even have this ability applied here is because I've got the Flacker, okay? He's got a very high DPS weapon, very good. I'd like to get an anointed variant. I don't have one yet, but ideally, we're going to be sponging him with the Flacker. So I've got the Flacker. I'm in close proximity when I lay down the clone. The clone's in close enough proximity, not too close, but close enough that the Flacker is going to deal serious damage to the enemy from me and from them. So on top of the damage that we're throwing at them from the all the kind of the skills that we've got filled out here, on top of that we've got the clone throwing in some serious damage on top of it. And then we've got this skill tree, the skill tree for the sentry turret. We've got the ability, after killing an enemy, Zane gains increased movement speed for a few seconds. Again, we're talking about maximizing that movement speed. If you see me at my fastest, it's insane. I'm bolting around at lightning speed. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's a lot of fun though, and it's really good. It's especially important in a situation where you're trying to avoid enemy fire when you're at low health, because it's critical. You got to make sure that you're definitely avoiding the line of fire. We've got the violent momentum. Zane's gun damage is increased while moving. So again, we're on the move. We're not stopping moving. The quicker I move, the greater the gun damage bonus I get. So again, just laying into that. If I'm really booking it around the battlefield, I'm going to be soaking them with damage. Unfortunately, it's not very specific about how much damage it does depending on increased movement speed. So we don't really know. We don't have a great idea of how that's doing, but I'm in that clip of Megamind, I'm killing him in about 23 seconds. So it's definitely working. It's definitely working. So now we've got drone delivery. This is the drone occasionally throwing a grenade at enemies. Of course, we know why this is useful. Again, we have that grenade mod active. And then we've got the increased reload speed. This is just, making sure we're consistently being able to throw everything we have at them at all times. We're just not stopping. We're just firing nonstop. Keep on laying into them over and over again. Do not cease for anything. Okay, so now we've got the kill skill gains increased effect and duration. Again, super useful. Kill skill bonus plus 25%, kill skill duration plus 7%. No half measures. I think that's a Breaking Bad reference. Anyway, so here's what we've got for the Digiclone's action skill kind of equipped abilities here. We've got the Digiclone set, obviously as the initial ability. That doesn't really matter. We know what that does. We've got Schadenfreude. Whenever the clone takes damage, Zane's shield is restored by a portion of that damage. Super, super useful. Again, getting your health, swapping with the clone, and then starting to kind of just let it take all the damage, putting it in a position in the battlefield where it is in the dead center, where it's going to take all the damage. It's super, super useful. Clone's great. It's a great meat shield. Fantastic meat shield. We've got binary system. Whenever Zane swaps places with his clone, a crowd nova is triggered around Zane and his clone. Again, we're really taking advantage of every single possible movement that you could be doing in this situation. Any kind of action that you're taking needs to have damage revolving around it, and this just kind of re-solidifies that. Obviously, we got Sentinel. I don't need to explain that. It's a little turret. He flies around. He shoots people. He shoots the guy good. We got static field. So the Sentinel emits a static field that sends a shock beam to nearby enemies, draining their shields and replenishing Zane's health. So this kind of falls in with the whole idea of just consistently, again, laying damage into the enemy. But it's also useful because if there's a situation where maybe you get off to a bad start or something like that, you can kind of just take advantage and, really just allow yourself a moment's respite to get your health back up. It's not really getting health back is never going to be an issue. You have complete control over how much health you have in this build, essentially, as long as you're timing your action skills right. We've got Bad Dose. Sentinel occasionally shoots out a beam of radiation that weakens enemies and buffs Zane. I find this one to be very, very, very useful. And again, this one increases movement speed and fire rate. Weakened enemies have decreased movement speed and attack speed. This one, I can't tell you how great it is that they have all these abilities in his skill tree that allow you to do things such as this. It's really, really excellent to be able to do that. Don't listen to Pippi. Pippi's being a little asshole. We're going to go ahead and move on to what we've got actually on the character now. So I could talk about guns for hours and talk about all the great guns that you could be using in these situations, but I'm not going to. I'm going to tell you that the Flacker is fucking god tier and that you should literally always be using the Flacker because it's insanely good. Insanely good. I cannot stress enough. This thing is probably going to get nerfed at some point because it is so goddamn good. I cannot stress how fucking fantastic this gun is. It does so much damage in such a short amount of time. You add the fact that all those abilities are being applied to the character and we're doing a lot of damage. We've got that clone sent out. We've got the Sentinel, which is causing radiation on the enemy, which is meaning they're more susceptible to damage, and they're really just taking a ton of damage at one time. So, you know, you got two people firing at it at the same time, and this is also, it really just adds to that whole damage thing. I know I keep kind of repeating myself about it, but saying, oh, it's all about damage, it's kind of obvious. But again, I'm just kind of demonstrating this build to you guys to see what you guys think of it. I think it's particularly effective, but let's go with the Flacker. I highly recommend going with the Flacker. You don't necessarily have to. Some other guns work. I found that the Occultist is pretty good here, actually. In a lot of scenarios, the Occultist seems to do a lot of damage. I think it's particularly good against the Grave Ward. I mean, they kind of nerfed them a little bit. They didn't really describe how much they nerfed them or in what way that they did. But it's not as effective as it used to be. But I definitely find it being very useful in most scenarios, the Occultist. But the Flacker is significantly better in terms of just applying that raw damage immediately. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Flacker, there's not really a whole lot of room for error for it as long as you're kind of, the clone is within range. You got to think about that. The clone has to be able to fire this. And this is a projectile target that kind of takes its time. It fires like a rocket. It has to get to the enemy first. So that's something you need to think about when you're thinking about how this is going to apply to the build. That's why I go with the Flacker, because you simply fire the Flacker and it explodes exactly where you fire it. There is a delay, but it's exactly where you fire it that it's going to explode. So you can kind of meter out where the enemy is going to be and how you can kind of plan that accordingly. So for the shield, we've got the rerouter. When fully charged, the next shot drains 50% shields to deal 120% bonus amp damage and return it as health. So this is fantastic because we don't even care about this. If the shields are fully charged, we go into the battle and we're popping the ability. As long as we're using this first and then the action skill second, we're going to increase our damage so significantly. Unbelievably so. So obviously we get the 120% bonus amp damage, and on top of that, we get the fact that once you've thrown the clone out, it's just gonna again kind of soak them with damage. So I actually personally think that the rerouter is possibly the best shield in the game. I don't know. I've played around with a lot of them, but the rerouter seems to be very useful. It seems to be kind of an equivalent of the B shield in a sense. The B shield was nuts, and I don't know that we're ever going to get anything that really kind of compares to that. But this is pretty close. 120% bonus amp damage and return it as health. So that's super useful. Obviously, I don't think I really need to explain why 120% bonus amp damage is useful. It's just insane. If it's dropping our shields to 50%, it doesn't matter because literally the next thing that we're doing is dropping our shields to 0 by activating the action skill. So it's something that we don't really have to worry about too much. We're already kind of going in that direction anyway. So for the class mod, we've got Spirited Sonic Boom Infiltrator. This is just kind of a general one. When Zane's weapon speed and movement speed are increased, the lower his shield, the greater the bonus. So we want to make sure that shield is pretty low. The lower it is, the more damage, the more movement speed we're going to have here, and we really start hoofing it. We're going really fast, and we're applying a lot of damage in a short amount of time. This is why I call it a sudden death build, because you are at risk of death almost the entire time. As long as you're willing to kind of put yourself in that position, you're going to be very close to death most of the time. So we've got the Rain Firestorm here. I could take this or leave it, realistically. There's some other grenade mods I want to try out with this, but I found that this one's pretty effective so far. If you're just kind of tanking an enemy and they're, you're firing your gun at them and your clone and your turret are all kind of doing their job, they're going to fire grenades at it pretty regularly. I chose this one because it's relatively AoE, area of effect, and so naturally it's going to do a good job of just kind of adding to the damage that's being put on here. And then, of course, we got this one right here. This is kind of the main thing that we wanted to go over here. This is what takes us down to 1 and brings us into that sudden death mode. It's got a super cool Game of Thrones reference in there. What do we say to the God of Death? So what this essentially does is it takes all of your health and it puts it into your shield capacity instead. So the second that we activate our action skill, our shields are completely gone, and we've got that 1 health left. And we've got the ability to just soak damage, because the less health we have, the more damage we're doing. This kind of rounds it off here. And, I mean, the modifiers are kind of neither here nor there. Ideally, I would rather have a different variant of this artifact here. Only one, specifically one that might pertain to the types of guns that I use, like maybe one that's better for a shotgun, maybe one that kind of boosts explosive damage, something that appeals a little bit more to the flacker. So the build isn't quite perfect. It's not exactly where I want it to be, but this is pretty much the gist of it. I think it's a fantastic build. It's serving me very, very well. I'm able to solo bosses relatively with ease. Every now and again I have a struggle with it, but that's the game. It's the name of the game. You got to kind of learn how to tackle everything differently, and I think this is a pretty good one for it. It's a lot of fun. But that's pretty much all I wanted to cover here, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the build. I'd be curious to know if there's any other kind of changes that we could make to the build that you guys think would be interesting, or might make this better. If you have any ideas, please do leave them in the comments below. And thanks for watching, guys.